It was fall 2019 when the fairly well-known content creator for the game Portal 2, going by the name of Dark Rosen, tried to revive one of the almost lost practices of the Portal 2 community. Mapping contests. His contests forced the creators to make puzzles adhering to a certain theme or to certain rules and were held more or less every 2 months. Somewhere in early 2020, he inquired in his Discord server whether or not anyone had any ideas for the next theme. After giving it some thought, I finally got the idea to revitalize another rare practice. Creators jointly conceiving a puzzle. Collaboration. The idea caught on, and I decided to host the contest separate from Dark Rosen's, appropriately named the Make a Map with a Chap contest. Naturally, I was planning to participate myself as well, so I was only delighted when one of my best pals in the community sent me a message asking me whether or not I wanted to collaborate with him. I accepted without hesitation. The person who asked me this was Leomievs. And this man is a genius. Over the course of many years, the Portal 2 community has come a long way. Even though the vast majority of maps in the workshop is still terrible, some dedicated creators have been pushing the boundaries of logic to create ever greater conundrums of astonishing intricacy. Some time ago I made a video in which I created a fairly easy puzzle in real time, but that was hardly anything new under the sun. The people who occasionally or regularly create well-designed, difficult puzzles are bound to have heard this question many times. Just how did you come up with this? That is the question I will attempt to answer in this video, taking my latest project as an example. If any experienced Portal 2 players are watching this video, I would advise them to first try to solve the puzzle for themselves. It will not be an easy task, but ultimately it will be very rewarding to figure everything out for yourself. This video will contain major spoilers for the intended solution. Now, without further ado, let us get started. Leo and I discussed what the puzzle would be about, and I admitted that there was an idea that I had had for a fairly long time, but I had never managed to find the time or the motivation to work it out into a full map. The idea was to use a light bridge to suspend a cube inside a funnel, blocking a laser. An intricate move that would involve 3 of the main testing elements: a light bridge, a funnel, and the laser. Integrating all of these elements naturally into a single map is not an easy task. Any good puzzle with this move at its core would quickly become very complex. I said to Leo that I hadn't made a properly difficult puzzle in a while, so this could be a great opportunity to kill many birds with one stone. We discussed for some time what this critical laser receiver would do. We didn't like negative connections, those that would only stand in the player's way. No, it had to be more subtle. Like the polarity of a funnel, it had to be both a blessing and a curse. In the end, we gravitated towards the deactivation of a light bridge, blocking paths but opening others. We would think about it. And within a few days, Leo had thought about it. Leo had recognized that the funnel moving directly in front of the laser made the following very nice move possible. We had to briefly deactivate the light bridge to obtain the second cube. In addition, he found a very elegant way to force the key move that we had wanted to implement. First, the light bridge has to be active, and then by merely moving a portal, it has to deactivate again. And just like that, he had achieved what we had initially set out to do. We only had to make it a bit more interesting. In the second version, Leo suggested to spawn the laser cube over the goo instead, and to change the way to set up the core move to the following. We didn't end up keeping many of the other added moves that he suggested in this video, but that is not uncommon when making high quality workshop maps. You can see, however, that the core trick did not work very comfortably, because the platform of a quarter voxel would be too low, and of a half voxel would be too high for the cube to block the laser head on. We needed some help. We requested the help of a well-known member of the community, going by the name of Narcodes, to craft us a custom item that allowed us to construct a platform with a height of exactly 3/8. And so he did. It should be noted that Leo and I had a very clear vision of another clever trick that we still wanted to implement. And most of our ideas were attempts to connect Leo's layout to something that would allow for this clever trick to be required. Sadly, we never managed to integrate the trick into our map. Maybe it will see the light of day some other time. I will disclose, however, that it warranted the existence of a third cube and the possibility to change the polarity of the funnel. Feeling outdone by my friend, I rebuilt his concept and started experimenting on my own. I did not quite like how the light bridge blocked 2 holes in the floor, so I decided to let it block a portal service instead. And it is clear that the platform that Narcodes had made for us was at the perfect height. Now the core move could be implemented reliably. The idea to make use of the portal service below the light bridge was to allow easy access to the area across the gap, making it possible for the player to obtain the third cube. Later, it was found that this particular setup was insufficient, but the idea remained. Here the third cube would be a laser cube that would enable the player to enter a new area. This area would be home to the button that reversed the polarity of the funnel, and the laser receiver was just put there to force a reuse of the laser. Leo had processed my proposals and quickly improved on these ideas. He suggested that the floor surface could instead be used by the player to fling up to a certain area where the third cube could be retrieved. Still feeling indebted to my collaboration partner, I decided to sacrifice a night's sleep to contemplate the current state of our map very deeply. Later that day, I shared with Leo a new version of the map, which at first glance seems like a step back, but it could not be further from the truth. It is always good practice to force as many interesting moves as possible with one cube before making the second cube available to the player. Similarly, with 2 cubes before obtaining the third. We had thought that we had already reached that maximum, but that turned out to be wrong. This new version only counted 2 cubes. By doing a number of clever moves, it was possible to open a fizzler that led to the funnel polarity button using only these first 2 cubes. And it was subtle, it forced many reuses of elements, and was just beautiful overall. At this point, we were both certain that the opening moves from the map would be precisely these. And the third cube? It could be relocated. The complexity of the file of the map was not that great yet, but the puzzle was already quite tricky. The next brilliant idea came from Leo, and it pertains to the highlighted area. Leo likes common themes throughout his maps, and what better theme to continue than that of the light bridge blocking passages? He realized that the highlighted setup had a rather subtle property that it could not quite be accessed when using the light bridge. Play would require the blue funnel to obtain the third cube. Even though this would still not be the final location for the third cube, this construction remained until the very end. Leo continued to add a few extra steps to this sequence, introducing a portal surface that seemed innocent at first, but would be of tremendous importance a few days later. Namely, when moving the construction with a hole in the glass across the map, the surface created a perfect place for the third cube to spawn. The player would need to go through all the steps just to turn the funnel blue, which in turn would grant access to the third cube. But getting a third cube for free would not be very interesting. Instead, we envisioned this third cube to auto-spawn onto a very helpful button, which would be lost after collecting the cube. We contemplated for a while precisely what connection would be perfect for our means, and ultimately we settled on a fizzler sealing of the laser area. The final location of the fizzler would be somewhat different than what is shown here, but again, the idea survived. The main question at this point was, how do we integrate a third cube into the puzzle? The moves that we had so far were already quite elaborate, so ideally we would deviate from what we had as little as possible. Of course, it was Leo who suddenly constructed a truly brilliant sequence. The area with the funnel polarity button was very secluded, so swapping cubes was not very easy to do. Leo's idea was to add a second way to enter this area, which was only possible with the funnel already blue. It added a beautiful purpose to the most far out portal surface, and of course, it couldn't just be as simple as pressing the button. there had to be a little trick involved to get the timing right. It was just genius, and there was no doubt that this would be a keeper. With the third cube now being where the second cube was, we wondered whether or not the player could achieve a full cube swap, which meant getting the second cube to the third cube spawn area. And after a lot of thought, I found a somewhat subtle way to do it, if there was a small portal surface facing the button that controlled the polarity of the funnel. Leo complained that one of the portal shots occurring in my solution would require seeing through 4 sets of grating, which I had not considered an issue while playing on my PC, but Leo did, as he just played on an outdated laptop. He proposed this glass construction, which I found very aesthetically displeasing. I suggested that we made a small hole in the wall to see the surface through instead. When Leo pointed out that the hole would be too big, I discovered that a clever use of Narcode's custom-made item to construct a narrower hole in the wall would work perfectly, and with this, achieving the cube swap was possible. What is shown in the video now should have been my moment of triumph. I contemplated for a very long time the easiest configuration I could come up with that would require the cube swap that we had just achieved. And after a lot of thought, I found that reviving the area behind the funnel, equipped with only a flip panel and a ceiling button, would be sufficient in a way that was not completely obvious. I really liked this setup. It required very few elements and it forced all of the moves that we had already planned for the solution. For me, the map could have ended right here. The map was already quite large. It had grown fairly complex. It would not be a pushover to solve. This is what it looked like in the editor at the time. I was proud of what we had achieved. It would have been one of the better maps in my workshop, without a doubt. But Leo was not content. Leo still wanted to implement the move that first served as the motivation of the introduction of the third cube and the switching of the polarity of the funnel, but after some time it became clear that it was just not going to happen with the current layout that we had. I had grown much too attached to the logic here to give it all up for one more exotic idea. So eventually we moved away from it. For a while I tried to connect the area behind the funnel to the area with the button that controlled the polarity of the funnel, but without success. After some more time, we concluded that the area behind the funnel, however perfect for my ending, did not support enough options to continue with even more interesting moves. I once mentioned creating some pathway leading into the third cube spawn area, and Leo went ahead with this idea. You're watching his first attempt at creating some difficult and convoluted logical path using this extra area. It didn't quite work out yet in details, but the potential was there. All we had to do was find the perfect setup. Suffice it to say, the person to eventually find this perfect setup was none other than Leo. Though his original suggestion was a bit hard to decipher, the logic within it was brilliant. Again, I had no doubt that this was the perfect ending. All I had to do was change his idea into a well-designed exit area, and we would be good to go. Or at least, that's what we thought. We still had to think of unintended solutions to our logical monster. Of course, it was merely wishful thinking to expect that there were no shortcuts possible. It turned out there were numerous. It all worked out in theory, but the map was as broken as a glass after dropping it from a skyscraper. You could complete the map without swapping the cubes at all. You could use the funnel to manipulate the respawning third cube, deactivate the light bridge with a delay by putting it in the funnel at an angle, still skip having to do the whole cube swap. The list goes on and on. I do not know how many times I redesigned that stupid third cube spawn area before it finally worked, but it finally worked. New fixes rendered old fixes redundant. Subtleties came and subtleties went, but ultimately the process stopped and the map worked as it should. A logical masterpiece, after more than 4 months of working on it on and off, and countless hours of thought, experimentation and further effort. The map was finally done. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for, the full solution. In order to prevent unintended solutions, the player now has to spawn the third cube by hand first. Getting the design of the area near the third cube just right took a lot of effort and failed attempts. Now, the player can obtain the laser cube and move it in the funnel to obtain the second cube. After retrieving the laser cube again, the player executes the core move of the map. It's funny that this move occurs only once in the solution, and only at the very beginning. Now the player retrieves the second cube and stacks both cubes in order to activate the light bridge when respawning the second cube. This enables the player to bring the laser cube out of the laser area. This cut here is because I got a Discord notification while recording. Next, the player stacks the cubes again to open the area housing the funnel reversal button, and with some further steps uses the second cube to reverse the funnel. With the funnel blue, the player can obtain the third cube. In order to get it past the fizzler, it first needs to switch places with the laser cube. With the laser cube back, the player sets up a similar move as the one in the beginning, with the funnel now blue. This allows the player to use the ceiling button to get the third cube in the funnel reversal area. It is to be put next to the button, because the funnel needs to be orange first in order to get the laser cube out of the laser area. This allows the player to bring the second cube onto the button near the third cube spawn area. Next, the player repeats the moves with the ceiling button in order to swap the laser cube with the third cube. A subtlety here is that the third cube has to be respawned in order to get it out of this area, because it's hard to retrieve otherwise. Now the player can finally go into the exit area for the first time. I leave it to the viewer to contemplate precisely why the cubes need to be in these positions in order to gather them all again into the exit area. It is not obvious, however, but doing this will make you understand the puzzle completely. By suspending the third cube on the light bridge over the ghoul, it can be brought into the exit area. After respawning the laser cube, the player needs to retrieve the second cube. The reason for this cut here is because I forgot what to do. Using the orange funnel to pull the cube, now that the fizzler is deactivated, the player can move their portal to catch the cube. And now all that's left to do is to set up the final move. The respawning second cube will trigger the deactivation of the light bridge, causing the cube to fall neatly onto the button, raising the piston. And there we have it. Easy, right?